I am Alli Macken, and I am 46 years old. I live in Gaithersburg, Maryland, outside of Washington, D.C. I have stage 4 appendix cancer, and I was diagnosed originally 9 years ago with colorectal cancer. And then after a 7-year period of being NED, 2 years ago I had a recurrence, and we found out it was actually appendix cancer. So that's where I am right now. At the moment I am NED, but it's taken a lot to get here. Outside of cancer, there's a lot. I am a mom to 4 wonderful children, 2 boys and 2 girls. The boys are 16 and 14, and my daughters are 11 and 9. And I have a husband, Jack, who's wonderful. I met him in college, and it's crazy that we're still together, and we're gonna have our 20th anniversary in June. So I had no symptoms at all. I had my September 11th of 2014, my daughter was born. She was my 4th child, my last child. About 2 weeks after that, I had come home from the grocery store and I had horrible abdominal pain. And like it just out of nowhere. That's the only symptom that I had. And only on that day. Uh, and by like 8 o'clock at night, it just wouldn't go. It was getting worse. So, I made the decision to go to the emergency room. And I thought it might be something related to just having had a baby 2 weeks earlier, but I wasn't sure. So I went to the emergency room and got checked out. What they thought it might be was appendicitis, but they weren't even sure it was that because I didn't have the classic symptoms. I had the pain in the right place, but I didn't have a fever to go along with it. And my white blood cell count was not super elevated. So they took about a day vacillating on whether or not they were going to take my appendix out. And then they decided that they would. So they took my appendix out, and I remember seeing the doctor. I spent one night in the hospital and seeing the doctor afterwards, and he had a smile on his face, and he said, "I'm glad we took it out. Your appendix was angry looking." And so that what they believed is that it was just the early stages of appendicitis. And so took the appendix out. That was going to be the end of it. And then 2 weeks after, I had a follow-up visit with the surgeon. So I have 3 children with me in the car because they're not in school, and I was bringing them everywhere with me. And in my mind, I'm driving to an appointment to be told basically like you can resume your daily activities. You can lift again, go on, have a great life. Thank you, whatever. I should have known when I got there things were a little off because the receptionist was like so sweet, and she had all these toys by her, like on the other side of the door where she was. And she said, when you come in, like the baby, I was feeding, I had to feed the baby. So she had to stay with me. She said, why don't you leave your 2 other little ones out here with me to play while you see the doctor? And at the time, I was like, that's so nice of them. Oh, how sweet, right? I think now I know why they didn't want to have them in the room with me. So I got into the doctor's, the examination room, and was sitting there holding my baby in my arms, and she was a month old. And the doctor came in, and he basically sat down and said, I have to talk to you. And it still didn't register at that point in my mind that it was anything serious. I don't know why, it just didn't. And then we're sitting, he said, you don't have to sit on the exam table. Like, if there was a chair and another table that we could sit at. And he said, he put down a piece of paper, and he said, when we do surgery, we always do pathology. And so whatever we take out of you, we examine. And so we sent your appendix to be examined by the pathologist. And we had some surprising findings. And then he turned the paper over, and this I really remember. He put his hand on my hand because my hand was on the table, and he said, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but you have cancer. And that I was feeding my daughter, and like everything went, like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's like everything muted out, like, you know, like then I was like in a vacuum. And he was talking, he was saying stuff after that, and I don't really like those first like 2 minutes after, I don't remember what he was saying. I do remember that then he got tears in his eyes, and I said, "Oh, don't worry." Like, I said to him, "Why are you, like, don't cry, it'll be okay." Like, I was consoling the doctor. And you know, he said, I hate to, like, he said, this one shook me. You're the same age as my wife, and you're young. So then he said, you're going to need to have another surgery, and you're going to need to have chemotherapy. You know, you don't think that's going to happen to you when you're 36 and you have 4 kids, and I'm feeling like life is just in a good spot, and we're like just such a busy, active, fun family, and I just didn't need this. So I was very lucky because where I live outside of DC. I was able to find a comprehensive cancer center, and I would suggest to anyone, if you get a diagnosis of a cancer, especially a more rare cancer, find a comprehensive cancer center. Not to say that community doctors are not wonderful. They are. But you need a second opinion. My doctor, I was very, very lucky, is still my medical oncologist, Dr. John Marshall, and he's one of the best in terms of gastrointestinal cancer treatment. Either way, we were going to do another surgery, which is called a hemicolectomy. So I had a right hemicolectomy. Dr. Marshall got me in touch with my surgeon, who's Dr. Patrick Jackson. He is an amazing doctor, and I will forever be indebted to him. He has performed multiple surgeries on me and saved my life, and we just like hit it off and have had a good relationship. So he was kind of, captaining the ship at that point in time, and then I had a colonoscopy done. That came back clear, and then in the beginning of mid-October, I had surgery. I had the hemicolectomy done. I forget exactly how much it was, but they took a chunk of my colon out, and I had clear margins, which was good. I was in the hospital for about 4 days and came home, and then I went on to do adjuvant chemotherapy. On my way to the Lombardi Comprehensive Cancer Center, might have had a little cry on the way. Pretty much happens every single time. They're drawing my blood to make sure I'm clear to take chemo today. My numbers look good, so I'm on my way up to the 5th floor to the infusion center. It behaved like colorectal cancer, and you can have a colorectal cancer tumor in your appendix. Just because the tumor's in the appendix doesn't mean that it's appendix cancer. And what I had was adenocarcinoma, and it was with goblet cell and signet cell ring features, and it behaved like a colorectal cancer under the microscope. So that's why, like, they thought it was colorectal cancer. I had just celebrated my 7th year of being NED, and 2 days after that, I ended up in the hospital in pain in my abdomen. To be honest with you, at first it didn't really go right to cancer. It didn't take long to get there, but it didn't go right to cancer. I was in good shape at that point in time, and actually I had the whole week leading up to when I finally went to the hospital. I was having like intermittent abdominal pain, and I remember one of my girlfriends, like, we had gone for a walk it was the Sunday, and I went to the hospital on Tuesday, and she's like, "What, is your side hurting? Like, what is wrong?" Because she could tell I was favoring my left side. And I was like, I think I pulled a muscle or something. I honestly thought like maybe I pulled something from like working out, because we were like flipping tires, and we were doing a lot of stuff. So when like I was not thinking that it was cancer. And then the day that I went to the hospital, I went for a walk in the morning. And I like just it's like 4 or 5 times a week. It's the same walk. And it's just like a 2 mile walk just to start like the day off because it helps me clear my head. And I'm not running. I'm just walking, like not fast, nothing, just walking. And on the like way back, uh, the pains like just kind of really started to increase, and I couldn't walk like 10 feet without having to stop. And the only way I could get relief was to bend over and put my like hands on my knees. So I was like changing position, and I must have taken pressure off of whatever. So at that point in time, I was like, something's really wrong here. So I have to go to the hospital and find out why. And cancer was percolating back there, and I was thinking, like, is it cancer coming back? And so I got home. My husband, we called the doctor's office. I called my oncologist and my primary care, and my primary care was like, you should go get this checked out, and she was like, stay calm. It could be meant like a lot of things. That my oncologist said the same thing, and he actually thought maybe it was adhesions from having had surgery. He said you could be getting like a blockage, which is not uncommon. You had surgery, you get adhesions, and before then I'd never had a blockage, but that can be, I've had them since, and they're very painful. So he was like, and if that's what it is, it's just bowel rest, like, and pain management. And I was like, okay, so that kind of made me feel good. And then on the way down to the hospital, the pain intensified by like, I don't know, 15-fold. It hurt so bad. And then we got there, and like, I think that they took pity on me because they saw how like miserable I looked. So they triaged me pretty quickly, and then got a CT scan. I got some pain medicine, and the CT scan came back. They put us in a room. Okay, and like, because the emergency room was packed, so I was on a stretcher in the hallway, and then they were like, you know what, we're going to take you into this. It was actually like an office, like an on-call office in the emergency room, and it had like a desk and a little like couch in it, and they wanted to talk to us in there. So that at that point, I said to my husband, this is bad. It's probably like the cancer's got to be back. And they did not think it was colorectal cancer. They actually didn't think it was a recurrence. What they saw was a 12-centimeter tumor in my abdomen, and it looked like it was attached to my ovary. I mean, it was attached to my ovary, and they just, until they opened me up, they didn't know that for sure. And they did the surgery, and then when I came out of surgery, everyone was celebrating and happy because they were like, it's not cancer, it's not cancer. What had happened, I had an ovarian torsion. So I go home and then go back to see Dr. Jackson 2 weeks later for the same thing, thinking I'm going to get cleared to go back to daily life. And it's like, Groundhog Day. So my husband was in the waiting room, and he's like, I think Jack needs to come in for this appointment. I was like, really? And he's like, yes. And same thing, he had the pathology papers and showed them to me. And he said, so, we're going to probably be seeing quite a bit more of each other because you did have the torsion and all of that, but we believe the cause of it was what they called a focal point. So it wasn't even big enough to be called a tumor at that point of adenocarcinoma, and with the signet ring and the goblet ring cell features. And so it was cancer that caused the whole thing. And yes, that probably was just a fibroid that blew up, but the torsion was caused by the cancer being there. And at that point, they thought they probably got rid of the cancer. And I went and saw because I was like, why don't when they were doing the original surgery, I wanted a hysterectomy. or at least both ovaries removed. I was done having children, and I'm like, why don't you just take them both out? Well, they don't do that, and for good reason they don't do that. They're like, you need to go through menopause yourself. It's better to do it naturally, and like they weren't gonna do both of them. So okay. So then I say to my medical oncologist, like, now can I get a hysterectomy? Can I get we know that there's cancer in my abdomen. Can we get, take it, or on my ovary, can we just take it out, if it spread around? And they still didn't think that there was going to be any more cancer because, like I said, my cancer is so weird. It behaves weird. Usually when you have a recurrence, like the way my doctor explained it to me is, like, think of a garden and the weeds grow in the garden. So your recurrence is the weeds. And if the weeds would pop up at the same time. And he said, so if there was more cancer there, we would have seen it. Like, they were in your abdomen. They would have seen other, spots of cancer in your abdomen if it was there. And, recurrences don't behave in a way where you have like a recurrence now, and he's like, in a month you have another recurrence. Like, that's just not, it's usually all at once. And I was like, okay. And he said, so what we're going to do is monitor you, and we'll do scans, and we'll do ctDNA blood testing. 8 months go by, it's June, and the same pain on the other side starts. And I knew then, I'm like, it's definitely cancer. And I was about to have, it was not as intense or as bad as it had been the first time. It was really like on and off, on and off, on and off. So I was also kind of like, maybe it's not, and I didn't call the doctor right away because I was scheduled to have a CT scan in 2 days. And I'm like, I will wait for the CT scan in 2 days, and then if I go to the emergency, the pain wasn't that bad. If I go to the ER, they're just going to do a CT scan. I have one scheduled for 2 days, so I'll just wait. I went and I did the CT scan, and then the day after the CT scan, I was in the pain increased a lot, and I was obsessively checking for my results, because that's what you do when you're a cancer patient. Whenever you've had a scan or any test, you obsessively look for the report to come in, and it did. So I read it, and it was bad, and it basically said that they were concerned for something called carcinomatosis, and that is basically when the cancer has spread all throughout your abdomen. So there was at least 4 different spots on my abdominal wall that were suspicious for cancer, and on my ovary. So I lost it, and I was in my mind thinking this is it. I'm gonna die. I've gotten twice I've been lucky enough to have surgery and whatever, and I was mad because I'm I should have fought harder for them to take the ovary out. I had the surgery at Georgetown. They took my other ovary out, and they scraped where they thought where the tumors were, and then they thought anything else. I went on oxaliplatin, capecitabine, and Avastin every week, and all the typical side effects and the steroids, and I had the big moon face. And then they wanted me to gain 15 pounds going into the surgery because you lose weight. HIPEC, it's called HIPEC. It's hyper intra-abdominal, Basically, they go into your abdomen, take out everything that has cancer on it, and then bathe everything in heated chemotherapy. And it generally takes about 8 hours. My surgery lasted 12 hours. There was actually more cancer inside than we had originally anticipated. So the surgery was definitely longer than we thought it was going to be. All in all, they removed my omentum, my peritoneum, my gallbladder, my spleen. I had a full hysterectomy. They also ablated part of my liver. They scraped part of my diaphragm and ablated part of my pancreas, like the sac around my pancreas, since there was disease there, as well as a lot in my pelvis where they removed disease. So it was a lot. The best news was when I got out of the surgery, he got everything. So I came out of surgery with no cancer, which was wonderful. I can never look at myself in the mirror and not be reminded of cancer, ever. And that's hard to deal with because you'll be having like a great day and it won't be like I won't have thought about it at all. Or like very minimal, because once you've like had cancer and been through, I think, what I've been through, it's kind of like you feel as though someone's got like a gun to the back of your head and they can pull the trigger at any time. But like I'll have really good days where I don't think about it much, and then I'll go by the mirror or have to change and I'll see all the scars and you're immediately reminded of it. And then I didn't lose my hair, but it thinned significantly. And so I cut it super short, which I hated. I did not like the way that it looked on me at all. And then that was when I was doing chemo. And then I had like a moon face from all the steroids. So it just didn't I couldn't color my hair anymore because my hair was too like I hated the way that I looked. It sort of takes takes away from you. So like even someone with the highest self-confidence would be shaken by having experienced this, because you just look different to yourself. And people will be like, it's hard because you also like feel like you'll feel horrible, but they're like, I don't look sick, so that there's that going on too. And so generally people will just assume that you're fine, but we're not. Like, I'm not. I'm in pain every day, and I'm tired all the time, and I feel like I'm half the person right now that I was, although I'm positive about it. I'm getting back to where I was. It's just hard to, it's hard to go through every day like that. When you're diagnosed with cancer and you hear that, it's horrible to begin with. But when when they're actually telling you you're stage 4, the first thought, and I have this thought too, is, oh my God, I'm going to die. Because it's always been thought of as when you hit stage 4, you are hopeless at this point. And it was a death sentence. And it is not. We've had so many advancements in the cancer community, like cancer space, with all different kinds of cancers, that you are living with stage 4. Like I said, my doctors, when they told me it was stage 4, they were like, but we're treating it as a chronic illness. And right. So it's like, if you had diabetes, you would have to take medication for the rest of your life. So I may have to take medication for the rest of my life, but that's okay. That's what I'll do. And I do know that, yes, I probably will die younger than I would have if I didn't have cancer. It will affect my life. And I don't know if the disease will come back and be active, but you can be stage 4 and still have no evidence of disease. That's the space I'm living in right now. I would also say, if you have a medical team that's telling you you're stage 4 and they're not actively still giving you options, you really probably should seek another opinion. And again, I think it's like going to a comprehensive cancer center. In the American Cancer Association accredits them and says this is a comprehensive cancer center. So that I think that you're going to get more answers there, and you're going to get the latest research and the latest, because I've seen it in some of the online groups that I'm in, where a patient with appendix cancer will be told by their local medical oncologist, that's it. There's nothing more we can do for you. And then they'll get a second opinion with a surgical oncologist, and they'll be a candidate for HIPEC surgery, and they won't have even known that they were, right? So you've got to seek, like, you really have to advocate for yourself and seek out, like I said, second, third, fourth, it doesn't matter, opinion. Just know that there's always, like, and you're kind of buying yourself time, because we're all waiting for the next breakthrough. They're like, but especially if you're diagnosed as stage 4, you think about death, and you think about, like, your own death. And I think, like, for me, I think I would know that I was ready to move to die when it came to that, because I would be tired, and, like I said, it would be quality of life. I wouldn't want to do, like, chemo anymore, and I would rather just be comfortable and with my family. But I'm not there, and now I'm doing, I'm going to do everything that I can to stay healthy and not be there. But just because, like the biggest, I guess, thing, like, message I would say is, just because you're stage 4, you're not, it's not a death sentence. There is no expiration date on you. And, you just gotta keep pushing, basically. You've got to keep going. And, you don't have to be positive all the time, but, having, like, a mindset that, like, telling yourself you're healing instead of saying I'm sick, sort of sets you in a different mind space of, like, for me, it's like, I'm healing, I'm getting better, versus me just saying I'm sick, I'm stagnant, I'm here, I'm sick. So I'm always looking at it as a healing journey that I'm on, and I'm healing, and I would say to anyone else, especially someone that's diagnosed stage 4, like, think in those terms. Think that you're healing yourself. And that, and always have hope that, like, again, something is, like, right around the corner. I mean, and people that have had our cancer and other, even with colorectal cancer, they've made so many advancements where, years have been added to patients' lives. So that's what I would say.